welcome to another one of my videos. In this one we're going to be looking at ukuleles again and attaching the neck. After having done several dozen of them, I've tried different methods and different ways of doing it, and I've finally come around to one that a few that I particularly like. So I'd like to show you some of those techniques and some advantages and disadvantages of those techniques so that you can choose which one you prefer as well. We'll show you one that I am tending to prefer more these days. The first ukulele that I made the neck and the body separately, and before putting the back on, I had access to be able to screw the neck to the body through a block with wood screws. Now, when they invented string instruments, I'm not sure if they used screws or not, but I know that screws were very expensive because they had to be made individually by hand, and it was very expensive. So they looked for other methods to attach the neck to the body in other ways that were a lot more economic. Now, on the smaller ukuleles, the tension in the strings is not that great, and so they're able to put a little block on the inside of the body and drill a couple of holes and a couple of holes in the neck as well, and use a couple pegs, wooden pegs, and glue, sanding and fixing the face of that so that it will align properly so it's nice and straight. But for the smaller ukuleles, a couple of wooden pegs through there glued is sufficient. Now, with the bigger instruments, the string tension gets a lot more, and so to join that, you need more surface area for glue to stick to. So you can cut in that block a mortise, and on the neck you could cut a tenon so that that will slide in there and afford a lot more area around the face and into the mortise and tenon for the glue to stick. And of course it's the length of the body, so it is reasonably effective. And that works fine for the lower quality ones, but there's a difficulty that it might pull out being straight-sided. So they eventually started to do like a dovetail joint. And that's a lot more complicated, just to slot straight down in there and have it in tight enough into the dovetail joint. Doing a straight dovetail joint initially. Now, the most difficult but considered to be the most fancy way of doing it, the most expensive way, is to not only make a dovetail joint in the block, but to make it tapered as well in a triangle, rather than just a straight dovetail joint. That means that your neck will go into the triangle and it's going to be large. Now you start shaving off the edges so that slowly but surely goes down in there, and at the same time as you're shaving, you're checking alignment up and down and alignment sideways, so that by the time you've finished, it is down flush with the surface and very solid, very snug in there. But that is the most fancy but the most fiddly way of doing it. Now, somewhere along the way in the history, the Spanish got very smart. They figured, I suppose, that by the time you've cut out all that material and you cut out on the body all of that material, why not do both steps in one hit and just do one groove and stick the side into that like that and do it in one hit. That means your side has to be pre-cut in your mold so that that can slot down into the neck, which is nice and efficient. But it does mean that your mold has to be reorganized to allow for the neck. That means that your mold has to be able to separate into two halves at this end with a bolt, and you've got to have this gap up the other end, and I basically figured that by putting a piece across here with a couple of screws, which holds the mold well and has space for the neck to go down. Some people do it different ways, fixed on a board, some with poles, some with all sorts of things, but this is the way that I have figured out so far that works for me. Now the difficulty with having that opening for the neck converts into a blessing, because now with a stick I can now align the neck up and down and sideways with a stick clamped to those 3 points anyway, to align everything and glue the lid on, and the back the opposite as well, all in one foul swoop, in one hit. So I would have done all the ribs and internals and everything during the process. This is just loosely to show you how it works. Putting that stick clamped at the top. So now I can clamp the back on as well. So I'm finding that although the mortise and tenon joint, or the tapered dovetail joint, is very high quality and everything, it's very fiddly. It's very solid though, but the Spanish way of doing it I'm liking, because once you've got past the mould design to get that neck in there, everything else aligns and comes together all in one hit quite nicely. So this is the method I'm tending to prefer.